Last week, I read a poem written by Rumi, and then went through some of the different statements and creative beauty that he shared in his poem, and found that we only got about halfway through the poem. So some of you asked that I continue on and finish that whole talk. So this morning, my plan is to finish that. And then if there's time left over, we'll go into what I had originally scheduled to talk about this morning, which is a continuation about the soul. It's very interesting to even consider the soul. I don't know how many people talk about their soul. When you're, engaged in a conversation over a meal, do you ever talk about your soul? When you are sharing personal insights with one another, do you qualify these insights as being inspired or impressed upon you by the light, within you? Probably not. As a child, I talked about the soul all the time. It was just so natural. But as an adult, not so much. And why is that? We're so busy with the mundane life, with the concrete life. These days we're busy, our conversations are busy with politics and our anger or our joy or our dismay, who's running, who's not running, who should be running, like it's Elizabeth Warren, and in this country anyway, that our soul is just kind of over here, and it really should be here. Our awareness of the soul really should be here. And this is why we should be grateful for our artists and our poets, especially, because they're in contact. Not all of them, of course, but they're really accomplished talents, are expressions of their soul. So that's why I wanted to read and to talk a little bit about this poem written by Rumi, and maybe inspire some of you to get some of the books written by the great poets. Or today's world, we can just go into Google and get anything we want, by these great masters, and read them. And it's like, to me, it would be like studying Agni Yoga, the Agni Yoga teachings, that every sutra in the Agni Yoga teaching is a word of the master, the greatest of souls that walked on the planet, at one time, and now continue to inspire us in our dreams and in other ways. So why can we not do the same thing? Why do we have to argue and yell and impose our will and insist upon our way in the day-to-day life, instead of expressing the beauty and the wisdom and the joy and even the principles of the soul? I think our answer to that question will be different for each of us. What we can be grateful for as spiritual students on the path in today's world is meditation. Meditation is that time that we set aside to contact the soul, to allow the beauty and the music and the creativity and the light of the soul just to come into our aura, to permeate our entire aura with its significance, with its light. And then our challenge is to sustain that energy, to sustain the inspiration our soul has given us, to sustain the creativity, the personality-less of that experience. So let us take today's talk into our life today, and it's like when you get out of your chair this morning, whether you're sitting in front of the computer or in front of your web TV or here at the center, don't just leap out of the chair and jump back into your skin, or back into those personality vehicles, which so oftentimes you do. It's like when you stand up from your chair, think that you are lifting your soul with you and that you're going into the day, the rest of your day, aware of this magnificent light and love and power called spirit that is within you. Let's see if we can do that today. So I'm going to read this whole poem again and then pick up where we left off last week. He says, merge yourself in the community and know the joy of the soul. Enter the streets of ruin with those who drink to the dregs, and empty your glass of your desire so that you are not disgraced. Close both the eyes in your head and find the inner eye. Open your arms if you want an embrace. Break the idol of clay and behold the radiance. Why get tired to a hag like this world for such a price? And for a ration of 3 loaves, why think of the sword and knife? At night, the beloved always returns, so take no opium tonight. Close your mouth to food and know another taste. The cup-bearer is no tyrant. His gathering is a circle. Come into the circle, sit down beyond the turning of time. Here is the bargain. Give 1 life and receive 100. Stop behaving like dogs and experience the shepherd's care. You complain of someone who took what you had? Well, forget him for the presence of him. Think of nothing but the source of thought. And that's where I ended last Sunday. And I ended with talking about an example about the life of St. Sergius in his monastery and how upset all of his disciples were because they had gone a few days without bread. And so they lost their faith and they were going to go out and get bread and never come back to the monastery again. They felt like St. Sergius and God had abandoned them. And yet, how foolish they were. Because remember the story where the next day, in came the farmers with their big wagons full of food, and they all dived in, except for St. Sergius, who went to the chapel and expressed his gratitude for the bounty. Let me go on now. This is what we'll talk about this morning. Care of the soul is more than your hunger for bread. Why in this world do you sleep in a prison? Avoid complicated thinking. The explanation is in the higher worlds. limit your talk for the sake of eternal communication. And he ends with this: abandon life and the world and find the life of the world. It's like you could take each line from that poem and let it be a seed thought. Care of the soul, he says, is more than your hunger for bread. I remember as a young person, this dear friend of mine, her name was Bethany. We would engage in hours of conversation about the soul and about life and about the mysteries that we still hadn't found. And it's like this hunger came from both of us because the soul wanted more. The soul wanted more from this life. And we would go to our teacher who could not feed and nourish the depth of what we were so hungry for. We were so frustrated. And so we did a lot of research on our own, because research then was really tough compared to research today. Research today, you just turn on your computer and you have the whole world in front of you. But we would go to used bookstores and bring books home and share what we had discovered with one another. And then one day we opened up some books by Alice Bailey in the Tibetan. And right there, it's like the mysteries began to reveal themselves to us. Didn't always understand what it was we were reading, especially esoteric astrology. Boy, that was a tough one. Or treatise on cosmic fire, even more so. And then we found Torkham's teachings. And we're still in the process. There are still books that are being published of his writings. Now we moved from that yearning, that deep hunger that our soul was asking for, and it began coming to us. So when I read this, care of the soul, see, that's what life is about. It's why we are in incarnation. It is to realize that we have a soul. That's the first step, to have contact with the soul. Not everybody has had contact with the soul. The reason being, it's buried. We read this in the teaching, that it's covered in layers and layers and layers of ash. And so people relate to life at a very surface level. But life is about money. Life is about not having money. Life is about the house, or life is about losing the house, or life is about not having any house. And our whole life and our worry system or our happiness system is all anchored in what we see, with our physical eyes, or what we have that we can touch. This is not the way we care for our soul. It's so interesting to me to think about this. So, as esotericists, the soul takes on a completely different meaning. In the religious world, at least my experience with the religious world is, we must live our life so our soul goes to heaven. Whatever that means. And then the religion tells us how to live that life. But it doesn't give the mysteries about the soul. I know the Kabbalah does. And if you look deeply enough, you find the esoteric teaching. In finding the esoteric teaching, now you begin to read about the soul, what it is, how it was given to us, how we can nurture the soul, how we can live as a soul instead of living as an earthly being. And to me, I think we have to fight harder to live life today as a soul, because there's so much distraction in the world today, distracting us from the purpose of life, distracting us from the beauty of life, distracting us from the fact that every single human being, most every single human being, has a soul. It's just not all those souls are awakened yet. So we have these great teachers that sacrifice their lives for us. They come into the world like Saint Sergius, like Rumi, like all the great ones that we know about and don't know about, come to the planet to say, this is why you are here, to realize that you are souls. Because when you die, until you have an awakened or an illumined consciousness, when you die, you do not know you are a soul. So it is important to expose yourself to an environment, to a media, to a teaching that reminds you why you are here, why we are here, and to remind us that we carry around in us this beautiful spark of life, and don't destroy it, and don't let other people destroy it for you. So care of the soul is more than your hunger for bread. Now, how are we going to take care of the soul? The Ageless Wisdom teaching, in this case through Torquem Serdarian, tells us that we must live a life of virtue and principle. Now, every religion, every major religion talks about the power of virtue and the importance of living a virtuous life. But the teaching breaks it down to the causal level and says, okay, now we're going to help you out a little bit. So you know what it means to live a virtuous life, but also why. So here's a list of what we're given that are called core virtues. So that's the first thing. You want to make this list of core virtues. And in making a list of core virtues, keep this with you every day. If I were you, I would, type it up, write it out, and carry it in your purse. Carry it in your billfold. Carry it in your pocket. Why? Because you're going to need it. Every single day, you're going to encounter opposition to these virtues. So you can pull out your list and see, okay, harmlessness. Somebody is attacking me today. Somebody is trying to put me under today. Let's say that I have spent 6 months working hard on myself and trying to be a better person, a more joyful person, trying to eliminate habits from my life. And that one day, someone confronts me and says, you're worthless. You are a worthless human being. You have the option of what? Say, I really am. Or say, wait just a minute. And you pull out your list and say, you know, I could really attack back. And I could tell you, you are more worthless than I am. Because that's the inherent or instinctive nature, you know, of the personality. But I'm going down this list. Oh dear, harmless. Okay, I've got to be harmless. Okay, well, what's next? Patience. See, patience with myself and my worthlessness, and patience for that person and their worthlessness. See how it goes, and what's so magical is to know this, and this is a quote: virtues are the manifestation of intuitional, atmic, and monadic energies. Now, for the spiritual student that has studied these terms, even if you haven't, the manifestation of the intuitional, atmic, and monadic energies are energies that are not accessible to most people. But if we, like in this case, I'm going to practice harmlessness. What that does, it puts me in the league of energies given to us from otherworldly sources. And now I understand this is why I need to be harmless. That person that's confronting me is confronting me with their darkness. And they're trying to evoke the darkness from within me to keep me from progressing. But if I practice harmlessness and patience, now I have this Fort Knox storage of energy that very few people have access to. Virtues are electrical lines that put us in contact with the higher realms. Where are you going to read this or experience it except by being a virtuous person? So here's the list of core virtues: striving, courage, daring, discrimination, solemnity, harmlessness, service, compassion, patience, and fearlessness. Gratitude, responsibility. And we are given 3 even more advanced virtues: enthusiasm, sacrifice, and nobility. Imagine if we took these core virtues and no matter what came into our life, no matter what the situation is, no matter what, we're going to respond with the expression of these virtues. This is called caring for the soul. The caring for the soul of ourselves and the soul of whatever is confronting us today. As we begin to express these 15 virtues, we are building pathways to something new, a new realm of possibility, a realm that we've read about in those books that I just talked about. And I was thinking even, there's a book, it's a book on healing, The Esoteric Science of Healing, I think it's called, where it talks about the spiritual triad. And there are many spiritual books in the esoteric teaching that talks about the spiritual triad. But if we only read these books and learn the definition of these terms, see, it's not a reality. It's like back in 2001, I went to India. Well, before I went to India, I had read stories, from all kinds of books about India. And, all very romantic stories about India. And except for the food, I never did find a book that said the Indian food, is actually outstanding. So I packed, duffel bags and all kinds of bags. This was before you could only carry one bag, with you on the plane. And so excited. And to get to India was not an easy trip. Many, many, many hours. And actually I had a layover in London, which was really fun. Went back to the old bookstores, which is my passion, to find these bookstores that you read about in London, that are historical. The books are historical as well. And then we got back in the plane, and then we went to India and got back on another plane, and from India to Calcutta, and it went on and on. Finally, we got to where we had to land, and anyway, that first step off the plane into, it wasn't Calcutta, I can't remember this other little place, this airport, we were met with soldiers with guns slung over their shoulders. And we were herded into this airport. And then I went into the bathroom to experience my second shock. No toilets, just a hole. Well, see, that's reality. That's reality. Reading about it, did not present the reality to me. So, the spiritual triad is not like stepping off the plane into India, because, this is way beyond the dense world, the spiritual triad. But the spiritual triad is what we want to be. It is a state of consciousness that gives us access to a whole different internet. Truly, I know, it's like, really? Well, you want to learn about Venus, you go into the spiritual triad, you jump in there, you've got a vehicle that now is made of the substance of the spiritual triad. You can go to Venus, and if you can't go there like on the airplane, you open up the door of your consciousness, and it tells you about Venus. It tells you what it's going to be like potentially 5,000 years from now. You'll learn potentially about your next lifetime. You're going to learn about what your life purpose will be for the next few lifetimes. This is when we live in the realm of the spiritual triad, is having continuity of consciousness, where we don't live and die and die and live and die and die and live and have to come back, anyway, to come back stupid and start all over again. Stupid and all over again. Think of all those years that we lost being stupid. And then we found the teaching again. When we open that door to finally live and experience the spiritual triad, Now we know what the soul is all about, what the spirit is all about. Rumi said, "Why in this wide world do you sleep in a prison?" Well, now we're beginning to see we don't know why. When we have all of this potential ahead of us, why are we still imprisoning our soul? Why are we imprisoning our consciousness with worries about how much money I have in the bank or how much money I don't have in the bank? You know, what is the doctor going to say to me tomorrow when I go in to get that blood test report back? I mean, there are certain things we have to be responsible for, but we also read. This goes back in biblical times, and this is why I gave you last week the story about St. Sergius. When you think the jig's up, that's like reading a fairy tale. The jig is never up, unless you make it up or down. God will provide. And I don't want to get too syrupy with this, because my understanding of God is not a God or a being that's out there, that God is inside. All we have to do is be in contact with God and have the faith that when I get that blood report tomorrow, I'm going to feel grateful and glad that there is such a thing called a blood report, so I know how to take care of this body so I can live my purpose, my life purpose. No worries, no fears. The prison for the soul, in other words, is our three lower bodies. The three lower bodies of the soul, the physical, emotional, and lower mental worlds. Our soul has lived in these worlds for such a long time that it has lost contact with the higher, more subtle realms. And we just keep affirming for the soul, this is it. Sorry. It is for this reason we need a cup-bearer, the teacher and the teachings, to awaken our soul from its prison. Once we are awakened, we become aware of the self, like in our meditation this morning. We become aware of the self. We become aware of the immortality of the soul. Rumi says, avoid complicated thinking. But isn't that what makes us important people? If we think and speak really complicated so nobody can understand us. And that way everybody knows how bright we are, how intelligent we are. But all the great ones talk about simplicity. Simplicity. And Rumi is saying, avoid complicated thinking, because the explanation is in the higher worlds. We do not really think until we lift our soul up into the light of the higher mind, the higher self. Until then, we are the result of the thinking of others. Hey, it's like that person that confronts you after 6 months of diligently getting rid of a habit, and that person comes in and says, you are a worthless son of a gun. Well, I am. But that's how that person was thinking. And I would guarantee you that person is thinking the same thing about themselves. So don't think about yourself that way. We have this incredible soul that we just keep burying in burying, B-E-B-U-R-Y-I-N-G, burying in, in our personality life. And we are in pain and we are in suffering and we worry and we worry and we worry and we have all of these doubts about the rest of our life. And we've forgotten we have this gift called the soul that is housed in us. And now we have to take care of it. We have to lift our soul up into the light of the higher mind. It is for this reason that Pythagoras required his students to take a vow of silence for 5 years to avoid complicated thinking. So don't be a chatty Cathy. You think about 5 years of silence. Pythagoras, who was a master. Pythagoras, was, we are told, was the incarnation of Master Kutumi. So he gave this simple wisdom to his students for 5 years, keep silence. We are told it is through the voice of silence that we are then tuned to the chalice, and later to the projected beam of thought from the higher worlds, which leads the steps of our soul from the world of chaos to the world of beauty. Rumi says, limit your talk for the sake of eternal communication. See, if all you know how to talk about is your day-to-day life, I just erased some words from what kind of life are we talking about? Your day-to-day life. Who cares about your day-to-day life? Who cares that I get up in the morning and walk 4 dogs every single day? Who cares? Well, the dogs. The dogs care. But I'm not going to give a talk about how every day, who cares? It's like, so what are we going to talk about with each other? Well, I don't know. Maybe the teaching. What about the teaching? Well, with our new Agni Yoga Quarterly publication, we have a section called The Realm of Beauty. Could we just spend 5 minutes talking about what is the realm of beauty? Nicholas Rourke wrote a complete book about the realm of beauty based on his travels and all that he experienced in the realm of beauty. That's what we want to talk about. We are told that Socrates was once invited to a wedding party. The wedding was going to be held in a neighborhood village. So Socrates took his servant with him and set off for the village. It was evening when they were going through a mountain pass. Socrates slowed his pace and sat down on a rock. The servant, thinking that Socrates was taking a little rest, he waited a few feet away, and after resting a few minutes, then Socrates told his servant to proceed to the wedding, that he was going to sit on the rock for a while and think. I know you know the story. I think I gave it last week, actually. Who cares? Because it's worth listening to again, because there's so much in this story. It's like, you can go to the mall, let me stay here, and look at this mountain pass and the beauty of the evergreen trees and the song of the birds. While you go ahead and go to the small. It's okay. So the servant left him, and once in a while looking back to see if his master was proceeding. Eventually, Socrates was alone in the darkness of night. The wedding party lasted until morning, but Socrates was absent. The servant hurried back early in the morning by the same path. As he came near the rock, he saw Socrates was still sitting, like a statue, in deep contemplation. Who has time today? We have to go to the grocery store, we have to go to the bank, we have to walk the 4 dogs. Who has time for a whole evening of contemplation? We can take that time. So the servant sat by the rock and waited. As the sun rose above the horizon, Socrates opened his eyes and smiled and stood up and said, "Let us give thanks to the source of light, and let us go home." I am going to end this, I swear. I'm almost done. Okay. Socrates was a thinker. He carried the torch of wisdom throughout the ages, influencing creative minds all over the world. What a legacy. What is our legacy going to be? Hey, Jolene, she used to walk 4 dogs every day. For ages, he was influencing creative minds all over the world, opening for them the path of goodness and truth and beauty and immortality. And I'll close with this. Rumi says, "Abandon life and the world and find the life of the world." We must forget ourselves to find our capital S self. The self is the highest within us. The journey of the soul is to return to that self. Rumi is telling us we must abandon our preoccupation with the worldly life and awaken as a soul. Once we awaken our soul, we will find the purpose of life and our life purpose. When we find the purpose of life and our life purpose, we will find the life of the world, the all self. So that's just one poem by Rumi. Look for other poets like Rumi. Like Tagore was another one. The Rourkes had a relationship with Tagore. You should read about the biography, the life of the Rourkes and the kind of life they lived and the people they hobnobbed with. Composers, Tagore, and what's ironic is some of the great ones that we consider great ones, Nicholas Rourke said, they're scatterbrained. Because he was a thinker. Okay, that's it. So I didn't get to today's talk. Isn't that fun? So next week, I'll go on talking about the soul.